G'day guys. So the drama at Disney continues, with the current president, Bob Chapek, being asked to step down during an Elton John concert no less, and being replaced by the former president of Disney, Bob Iger, who has returned to take his place as king. Unfortunately, I don't think Bob Iger returning is necessarily going to be the best thing for Disney. Let's not forget that it was Iger that started us down this path of creative diversity and inclusivity. It was also Iger's brainchild to start buying up IPs so that people didn't have to make anything new. And don't get me wrong, at the start that seemed like a great idea. Marvel and Star Wars had a massive resurgence in the fandom, making millions and billions of dollars at the box office. As a member of the Disney board, you would have looked at Iger and thought, this is the man, he's going to take us all the way to the bank. However, the thing about moneymakers is they have a sharp eye for when they're about to lose money. I don't know whether Iger sacrificed a Disney goat to Odin, but he was able to pull chalk and get out of there pretty quick once COVID hit. I would assess that he saw the damage COVID was doing to the Chinese entertainment industry and the parks in particular, and decided to get out of Dodge before that came to America. Poor Chapek, he was set up to fail from the start. I was cautiously optimistic when Chapek was put in charge actually, noting that he was a quote-unquote money man. However, my confidence in him quickly evaporated when we saw Disney bow to the vocal minority, shall we say, on Twitter about the Don't Say Gay bill.
I pledge to be a better ally for the LGBTQ plus community, apologize for not being the ally that you needed me to be, and committed to ensuring that our company lives up to its values. I meant every word, and that's what we're here to talk about today. I understand that we've made mistakes and the pain that those mistakes have caused. And I know that our silence wasn't just about the bill in Florida, but about every time an individual or institution that should have stood up for this community did not. I and the leadership team are determined to use this moment as a catalyst for more meaningful and lasting change. I want to thank the LGBTQIA+ Advisory Council, their allies, and everyone else who has submitted ideas on how we can take action.
From what I've observed, if you are planning to make money in any industry, you should probably keep your politics well clear of your end product. Because, in the words of Granddaddy Jellyfish, if you're at a party, you should seek to avoid talking about religion or politics because they are polarizing topics and they will fire people up real quick.
I never said that. I said people that discuss politics and religion at parties are dickheads.
Is that not what I just said? Anyway, speaking of not keeping your politics away from your end product and being a dickhead, this video is about Kathleen Kennedy. Kathleen Kennedy, or as we affectionately call her, KK, is the president of Lucasfilm Limited. She was appointed the head honcho position after George Lucas sold Disney the rights to Star Wars back in 2012.
And it occurred to me one day that the perfect person to take over the company was Kathy. It was just such a perfect fit. And I felt that I really wanted to put the company somewhere in a larger entity which would protect it.
If you're a fan of modern filmmaking, there is a very real chance that you've seen a film that had some level of involvement from Kathleen Kennedy. KK rode the coattails of Steven Spielberg and George Lucas when they were at the height of their careers, including Indiana Jones, Star Wars and Jurassic Park. That little sprinkle of films right there are arguably some of my favourites. Noting that Indiana Jones 5 is about to come over the horizon without Steven Spielberg and George Lucas attached to the project, now seemed like an appropriate time to discuss Kathleen Kennedy's influence on some of the most popular IPs in Hollywood. Spoiler alert, I don't think her influence has been particularly good. But of course I don't expect you to just take my word for it, so allow me to demonstrate my point for you. To say that Kathleen Kennedy is incompetent is probably an unfair statement given her pedigree. Let's not forget that she was the producer on E.T. and Back to the Future. She was also executive producer on a number of cult classics, including Gremlins and Gremlins 2. And she co-founded Amblin Entertainment with Steven Spielberg and her future husband, Frank Marshall. So I don't doubt that behind the scenes, her organisational skills are top tier. She probably makes good coffee too, given that Steven Spielberg recruited her as a secretary after she wouldn't keep her mouth shut.
I remember Kathy came into the room with her steno pad and her pencil, and she was horrible at taking notes, and she was terrible at, she didn't really know how to do it very well. But what she did know how to do was interrupt somebody in mid-sentence. We'd be pitching ideas back and forth, and Kathy, who's supposed to be writing these ideas down, suddenly put her pencil down and would say something like, and what if he didn't get the girl? but instead he got the dog.
My point is that as a producer and executive producer, she must have done a decent job given the success of many of the films that she was attached to. But, as I said previously, it's easy to be a producer when you're working with talented filmmakers such as Spielberg, Lucas, and even Scorsese, because all you need to do is organise stuff for them behind the scenes so that they can do their job uninterrupted. I would say that KK's real talent was identifying which filmmaker to hitch her wagon to, and looking at her filmography, she did pretty well in that regard. So by hitching her wagon to Lucas and Spielberg, she undoubtedly developed a close personal friendship with the two of them.
My forever friends, the inseparable, the indomitable Kathleen Kennedy and Frank Marshall.
You know, I mean, I've worked with Kathy for so many years. I mean, it is, well, at least like 35 years. Mm-hmm. And, you know, in close producing together, just working together, and as friends, and, you know, it's a great relationship.
At which point, all she needed to do was bide her time until the appropriate moment to strike. This moment, of course, came in 2012, when George Lucas sold the rights to Star Wars to Bob Iger and Disney.
The great thing about Disney, again, as we were saying before, is that, you know, it's between the parks and all the things they've got going. It's great that we have a chance probably to expand that. And, you know, there's lots and lots of opportunities at Disney that we wouldn't have at any other studio.
There's huge opportunity, given the tremendous success that Disney's had with Marvel and with Pixar, and now adding Lucasfilm to that. I think we couldn't be at a better home.
It, of course, helped that Kathleen Kennedy knew what to say at the right time to the right people to get what she wanted.
I think it's vitally important to anything we create that we hold on to the spirit of what started all of this. So I would say that that's really important to me.
So up until 2012, Kathleen Kennedy's career had been quite successful because she stayed out of the limelight, kept to the shadows, and did her job quietly as a producer without injecting any of her own personal politics into any scenario. This all changed when she became the president of Lucasfilm. Now, as the president of the film company, she had veto over all the creative decisions. Given that she'd been attached to some of the best film projects of the last 20 years, there was no doubt there was a level of confidence going in. That confidence would only increase, of course, after the premiere of The Force Awakens and its box office take.
As The Force Awakens grossed $528 million globally since opening last week. The Force Awakens racked up a record of $247 million over the weekend in the US and Canada, easily beating Jurassic World's North American record.
However, this success was also on borrowed time, noting that this was just the fandom hangover from not having a Star Wars movie for the last 10 years. Hollywood success and Hollywood money don't necessarily mean the same thing, and it's particularly clear when it came to the Star Wars sequel trilogy. The reaction of fans is often not felt in the film itself, but the subsequent film. So when The Last Jedi premiered and also did good numbers coming off the back of the success of Force Awakens and Rogue One, but left about half the fan base confused and upset by the treatment of Luke Skywalker, the reaction wasn't felt until the subsequent film, Star Wars: A Solo Story, where fans all but boycotted the film.
Solo: A Star Wars Story is opening in theaters this weekend, and even though it's going to make over $100 million, the number is being seen as a disappointment.
Yeah, so it made $84 million over the three-day weekend. That's way down from the $155 million that Rogue One made, the last standalone Star Wars movie. Now, with the American four-day weekend, Solo is going to make $103 million. This is seen as a really troubling sign for Disney as they continue to expand the Star Wars universe.
This art of diminishing returns was also felt with The Rise of Skywalker, which did, again, far less numbers than The Force Awakens.
No way to sugarcoat this. The Rise of Skywalker had a significantly lower opening weekend than The Last Jedi or The Force Awakens, with a $177 million debut, which is only a little better than Rogue One did. For comparison's sake, it brought in just under 20% less than The Last Jedi.
But so what? Kathleen Kennedy is the president of Lucasfilm. She didn't write and direct these films. It's not her fault that Rian Johnson's film The Last Jedi arguably split the fan base, and then the franchise lost money moving forward into The Rise of Skywalker. I actually think you'll find that it is very much her fault, noting that she was the one who sacked multiple directors for quote-unquote creative differences. She's also the one that took George Lucas's story treatments for episodes 7, 8, 9 and threw them out in favour of films written by J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson, who didn't talk to each other, nor did they have an overarching plan for the story.
The lesson is that, you have to plan things the best you can. There's nothing more important than knowing where you're going, but having a plan, I have learned in some cases the hard way, is the most critical thing, because otherwise you don't know what you're setting up. You don't know what you're, what to emphasize, because if you don't know the inevitable of the story, you're just as good as your last sequence or effect or joke or whatever, but you want to be leading to something inevitable.
You don't say.
This seems bizarre given that fans of Kathleen Kennedy will argue that she is brilliant at organising things behind the scenes. In my assessment, as I've already alluded to, this is what happens when your personal politics and agenda get in the way of producing the actual content. Evidently, the story treatments that Lucas had done up for 7, 8, 9 didn't align with what Kathleen Kennedy wanted to push moving forward. But what did Kathleen Kennedy want to push moving forward at Lucasfilm?
The company was bought by the Walt Disney Company has been amazing because they very much support the fact that we are trying to grow in the workforce, a number of women in executive positions and in all positions inside the company, and with the movies that we're making and with the protagonists that we're putting in the stories. So I get a huge amount of support with that. But we have 50% of our executive team are women. Mm-hmm. And 6 out of 8 of the people in my story group are women. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that would be surprised that we're making Star Wars movies and the majority of the people involved in the development of those stories are women.
Now, before I go any further and people start dropping depth charges labelled sexist arsehole into the sheltered harbour, I do not have an issue with women in filmmaking. Not at all. In fact, some of my favourite films have been directed or produced by women. Many of them, in fact, produced by Kathleen Kennedy, as I alluded to earlier. One of which has my absolute favourite strong female character ever committed to screen. Oh, she's beautiful. What I do have an issue with, however, is appointing people to positions of power based on their sex rather than their qualifications and experience. I understand that when the pendulum has been one side for too long, it needs to swing back the other way hard, and it's no secret that men have dominated Hollywood for at least the last 50 years. But really, it shouldn't matter who's in the director's chair or behind the scenes producing, so long as the end product is actually entertaining and gives the people what they want. The Star Wars sequel trilogy is what happens when you use an IP as a soapbox to push an agenda, rather than focusing on being the custodian of one of the most important intellectual properties in the modern film industry.
It is going to happen. We are going to hire a woman who's going to direct a Star Wars movie. I have no doubt.
Is it?
On the other hand, I want to make sure that we put somebody in that position who's set up for success.
Liar! Liar! Liar!
And it is interesting because I have a huge number of men who call me constantly and tell me how much of a Star Wars fan they are and how much they want to get involved in anything to do with Star Wars. I don't have a lot of women who call and have those conversations with me. So that's one of the challenges that we keep talking about, is if we do want to bring a woman in to direct a Star Wars movie, we want to make sure that it's somebody who's passionate and really, really wants to do a Star Wars movie. We don't want to talk somebody into it.
It's evident that there were people working on Star Wars that had creative vision who wanted to shepherd the franchise forward but disagreed with Kathleen Kennedy's personal politics, at which point they were promptly shown the airlock and replaced by more malleable directors who would toe the party line in favour of a paycheck. This wouldn't be an issue if Kathleen Kennedy was still working with talented directors and writers. The difference is that these directors and writers brought in for these new Star Wars projects were front-loaded with an agenda from Kathleen Kennedy, and they lacked the creativity to do it in a way that wasn't obvious. And unfortunately, when you don't have the talent to back up the message of the president, the consistency and quality of your storytelling goes out the window. So what you end up with is a company of activists and yes men saying yes, yes to Kathleen Kennedy's decisions, and you lack anyone with a backbone who's going to stand up and fight for what Star Wars should be. That's why when The Mandalorian came along, produced and directed by Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni, fans went wild even though it was exceptionally average, because despite being somewhat run-of-the-mill, it was good Star Wars told and directed competently by people that cared about the source material versus trying to push an agenda. But if you want further proof that even creativity gets crushed underneath Kathleen Kennedy, look no further than the Obi-Wan Kenobi series and the Book of Boba Fett. Here you had a team of passionate, creative people who have worked on The Mandalorian, so you know that they can produce good stuff, getting absolutely brought to heel because Kathleen Kennedy wanted to warp and twist the story to be more female-centric.
The way the two of them work together and the equal power and trust they both have for one another is really pretty remarkable. You just feel this sense that they've known each other forever and that he really depends on her.
I love the fact that everyone thought there would be a story about Obi-Wan Kenobi and Luke Skywalker, and nobody knew that this was the story about Obi-Wan and Leia.
One of the things for me that I really wanted to acknowledge in the series without getting too heavy-handed about it was this sense that, there's obviously been a lot of focus on Luke Skywalker and his contribution to the galaxy. But I feel like with Princess Leia, I don't think he could have done it without her.
Once again, these writers and directors lack the creative prowess to do this in a manner that's not jarring. So then whatever direction they've been given from Kathleen Kennedy is at the forefront of their creation. What you then end up with is a half-assed Star Wars that pleases nobody. Geez, it hurts a part of my soul to know that Tamira Morrison, Hayden Christensen, and Ewan McGregor came back for this. Mind you, Ewan McGregor shares a portion of the blame, noting that he was executive producer on the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. There are, of course, two exceptions to this, being Rogue One and even Andor. Despite all odds, these Star Wars products have come out relatively unscathed, telling a decent and concise story that are competently executed by quality directors. My assessment is that these two exceptions were not under the microscope of Kathleen Kennedy while she was creating the sequel trilogy or the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. As a result, the people working on these projects that were passionate about what they were doing were able to do their best work without interjections of identity politics. And when creative people are left alone to do what they do best, you get good products. Then, instead of the fandom splitting in two about the treatment of the most iconic character in Star Wars, creating one of the most toxic times ever to be a Star Wars fan, you have fans split on Andor not based on the quality of the production, but of the storytelling itself. What an absolutely brilliant time to have nuanced conversation about Star Wars. It is so refreshing after what they did to the sequel trilogy.
No, you're still holding on! Let go!
It's unfortunate that Andor may just be the best Disney Star Wars product that's been put out, and it's a show that barely anybody is watching. I plan on doing a full season review of Andor, noting that I covered the first 3 episodes. Turned out to be pretty good, guys. But unfortunately, it is the exception rather than the rule. I know that with the replacement of Chapek, the rumours have once again started up that Kathleen Kennedy will step down as the president of Lucasfilm. However, she has one more thing she can ruin before that happens.
Who is this man? I'm her godfather.
I hate that since The Last Jedi that I can't look forward to a Lucasfilm project without having an impending sense of dread about what Kathleen Kennedy has approved to happen to one of my favourite characters. I guess I shouldn't be surprised. After all, she set this trend well before she was president of Lucasfilm.
Start out thinking that we're going to have a new dinosaur in here and he's got to be bigger than the T-Rex. It turned out in our discussions with Jack Horner that by introducing our new villain, which is the Spinosaurus was in fact considerably bigger than the Tyrannosaurus Rex and considerably more vicious.
Imagine taking the most iconic dinosaur of all time and then killing it off in the first half of your film, then not using the new replacement in any meaningful capacity, and replacing the iconic poster. What a fucking dickhead. But she didn't stop there. She then degraded Han Solo by making him a horrible father and splitting him up with the love of his life, only to kill him off and not use the sacrifice for any real meaning in terms of storytelling. She then took my favourite Star Wars character and arguably one of the most important cultural characters in modern cinema and turned him into a defeatist hermit that abandoned everything he stood for, including his friends, and was somehow aware of the meta-culture surrounding the Star Wars prequel trilogy and was used as a vehicle to shit all over that as well, only to have him killed off at the end of the film when he decided to have any sense of agency at all. Sidebar sidebar, I will never forgive Rian Johnson for what he did to Luke Skywalker, only to do a complete 180 in The Rise of Skywalker, elevating the granddaughter of Emperor Palpatine to be the new hero of Star Wars, thereby completely destroying Anakin Skywalker's story and legacy. Now his sacrifice at the end of Return of the Jedi means nothing because a Palpatine rules the galaxy in the name of Skywalker. Kathleen Kennedy, do you have any idea what you have done? But now she sets her sights on Indiana Jones, the last bastion of Spielberg's and Lucas's work, that is yet to truly be corrupted by soulless copycats. Say what you will about the Crystal Skull, at least Lucas and Spielberg were on board. The irony of her working on Raiders of the Lost Ark as her first film is not lost on me. It's almost like fate that she's come full circle to destroy what started her career. I don't normally put much stock in rumours surrounding productions, but given Kathleen Kennedy's track record since she took over as president of Lucasfilm, I am very worried about the stuff that I've heard in reference to Indiana Jones 5, particularly when half the leaks have turned out to be true with reference to time travel. Hey, hopefully I'm wrong on this one and we get to see Indy and Sala go on one more amazing adventure and we'll get some absolutely iconic lines from the great man himself.
Asps. Very dangerous. You go first.
But I am not optimistic that that will be the case. Kathleen Kennedy's successful career can be attributed to those around her. She rode the coattails of better creators all the way to the top. And now, in the twilight of her career, she can sit back and look at all the damage she's wrought to the iconic male characters of modern Hollywood, and all in the name of a progressive ideology that didn't work out because she was no longer working with people as creative as George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. What a way to pay tribute to their great legacy by spitting in the face of their most iconic characters. But remember, I'm just a brainless lump, and it's such a shame that they only made 3 Indiana Jones films.
After you, Junior.